Welcome, listener, to an Encore episode of Spam, Spam, Spam Humbug. That's right, we are going back in time, and I apologize, I just have not had time to put together another Through the Moongate episode for this week. It's just been frantically busy with work and real life and all that stuff. So instead, we're going to reach into the archives. We're going to go back in time to this week, the episode that came out this week back in 2018, and it was another time, I will tell you that much. It starts as a discussion about Shroud of the Avatar and its projected launch date, which was in March of that year. And that kind of broadens out into a discussion of the game's technical merits and MMORPGs trying to act more like single-player games and how, the experience of the single-player narrative in some of those games is maybe ruined or maybe isn't by, having other players cluttering in the map. We even talk about, Underworld Ascendant and the promise of, because I think they had just dropped a trailer at the time that we had recorded that episode, and they'd released some screenshots. We were all kind of jazzed about how that game was shaping up and looking. So, like I say, it was another time. 3 years on, we're looking back and saying, wow, oh my gosh, what happened to both of those games, really? But 3 years ago, we were still kind of hopeful. And, of course, we are still hosted on Anchor.fm. You can find us at Anchor.fm/SSSH podcast, newer, more social podcast hosting platform, now part of Spotify, actually. And, of course, you can find us at spamspamspamhumbug.com as well. And as always, this episode of the podcast is brought to you by our Patreon backers, patreon.com/Ultima Codex if you want to join their number. Thank you to everyone who supports us, the podcast, and the Ultima Codex by that means. And as always, a hearty thank you to our co-producers, Seth, Golden Flame, Dominic, Violation, Helgrove, Gronk, Pascal, Thorwan, and now, John. John, thank you so much for your contribution to the podcast. Big thanks to you, sir. All right, that's enough for me. Let's jump back in time and get on with the show.
For one, I'm curious about seeing how the game handled offline, as it was one of the features I waited for when it was first announced on Kickstarter.
I think when it launches, it's just going to wind up on the pile of games that I've been meaning to play and that I expect to get to once I finally finish my own game, and coincidentally that will give them time to add the additional polish that still won't be done in time for their official launch.
Well, March seems very fast for me for the balance issues we have to tackle for the offline game. I mean, they announce companions and game balance and economy balance in the offline game. I'm not sure that will be ready in March, but let's be surprised.
I haven't been in the game very much over, its development. I placed the house when the time came to do that, and therefore played through the first, 2 scenes that you need to get through before you can get to the map, and then I just ran away from everything. So I don't know what the balance is like. I haven't been paying very close attention.
I must say I didn't connect in the last 3 months, but even then, the game right now handles like a MMO, like Ultima Online. So usually you have to be in a party to expect to defeat complex encounters and visit the map. You can be alone, but it doesn't always work well. I'm especially worried about quest lines and hints, how it will handle. I played recently World of Warcraft again, and say what you want about the game, but I understand that Richard Garriott is not very fond of the way they handle directions and immersion in the game, but damn, it's easy to follow quests, directions. And sometimes in Shroud of the Avatar, you're just left out in the cold, wondering what you have to do. And I don't need a big arrow pointing direction, or quest marks, question marks on the top of the head of people. I can ask questions to people in the game without that. But once I start a quest, I expect it to be not a second game of guessing what the quest wants me to do.
And that it's interesting because that was one of the things that, you know, the Grognard class, the subset of the people who are in it for the single game experience that are in it for the old Ultima style experience, you know, they very much were who was being catered to with, there won't be a quest log, there won't be an arrow pointing where you're going, you know, figure it out, take notes, do all the things that our old games needed. And of course, they've backed away from a lot of that. But, you know, there was a not as vocal as the online community, I think, but a vocal portion of the people who'd come into it from the single player side that really wanted that.
I understand the feeling because, well, I was there, I played these games, I used a little notebook to take notes. Yeah, but this was 30 years ago. And I expect some evolution of my games. I mean, if I wanted a Grognard experience, I could ask for 2D assets or 8 or 16 bits graphics, and I can have them in modern games too, as you know, particularly. But then there's a phrasing of the quests, and you can compare a game as huge as Shroud of the Avatar is, with so many people, and the confusing and the difficulty of orientation in 3D games with the simplicity of 2D and having only a dozen of NPCs or places to go in all the games. I mean, when I was looking for an information in Ultima 5 or Ultima 4 or Ultima 6, it was pretty obvious where I needed to go, and it wasn't. I knew what I needed to find. Let's give an example. In Ultima 6, you have to find one of the lost mantras, if you remember. And there's a book in the Moonglow library that you have to find. I think, if I remember well. It's pretty obvious what you're looking for, and it's pretty simple to find a book called the Book of Lost Mantras. Well, in Shroud of the Avatar, for one of the quests, we have to hunt a book, the original edition of a book, somewhere in the world. I'm sorry, somewhere in the world is not an answer. You have to get at least broad direction of places you can start. And there's no way of getting this information right now in the game. You just say, hey, please, find me 3 original books. Go. Well, yes, but that's not something that I want the game giving me as direction. The same goes for everything, Shroud. You're giving very broad direction, and please just go around and wonder what you want to do. I don't ask them to give me a broad arrow or a golden halo around the book. I can understand that, but at least I should know the town of the broad region where I have to go. Because if you played a bit in Shroud, you will know that moving around is complicated. You have to go on foot. And when you change regions, you have to go through gauntlets with enemies and run around or be killed and expect to spawn in a place where you can cheat the game of forcing you going through a very specific path.
Yeah, it sounds like while there's not any inherent reason why the old school style could not continue to work that it would require a much better direction given as a thing given to your character directly,
Yes,
as
and
opposed to giving the player arrows and such. And on the other hand, it's also worth considering that in the Ultima games and such, the old games that did that and that didn't give you an arrow had worlds that were a tenth the size of the Soda lands.
yeah, and that's a thing I think they didn't consider. But well, in my opinion, and I may be alone in this in this opinion, but it's mine. They didn't really did a good quest system in the original Ultima Online. I mean, it was just here's the world, please go around and do what you want. And they started doing quests more in MMO types in the previous Switched Riot games, Tabula Rasa. But again, it was not the same team doing Tabula Rasa, so it's not the same expectations. And yeah, it's sometimes it's just not clear what you are expected to do. I mean, well, and again, while I understand that they want to muddle the things by not giving you very strong directions, I still don't feel any urgency in the game to go complete any quest or follow any storyline right now. I mean, yes, you have to go on one of the path of virtue to complete the chapter 1, but from the moment you arrive in the world, yes, okay, there was this conflict, but beyond that, there's no sense of urgency.
I think there are two schools of how the MMOs are made. One of them is to how should I put it? One of them is to put a single player game inside a multiplayer environment, which is the way most of the game designers for MMOs are going. And there are very few like Ultima Online, Minecraft, and others in which it's the sort of sandbox. There's not a single player game in there. It's all or not necessarily a single player game, but it's something where you don't have an objective or something that makes you win. There's just so much stuff you could do and lots of crafting and things, very simple things that you do, which by themselves create a sort of story, a story of sorts, or they are a sort of reward by themselves. And that's something that I think it needs to be explored more.
You are right. And the separation between the two types came early on in the MMO history. It's EverQuest versus Ultima Online. And sadly, or not, depending on your opinion, we see now where we are going. Sandbox games are great, but they are not for everyone. And yes, the solo game parts, while I agree that most of the MMO designers go there today, is something new in the game industry, because until the last 5-6 years, MMO games were games where you were expected to, at a certain time in the game, adventure with your friends or people you want to be with online. And be it in a sandbox game or be it in a more EverQuesty type MMO game. And I think that they want to cater to a wider audience, to get the money of people who don't have time or social skills to gather a group of friends and play the MMO. And that's the reason why we see more and more experience in World of Warcraft or in Star Wars: The Old Republic, for example, or Wildstar, if you played one of these, with quests who are on quest line who are dedicated to a single player experience. You still have multiplayer requirements for things like dungeons or epic encounters or world quest bosses and things like that. And it's a huge part usually of the game too. But there's a core of the story that is accessible for single player. And one of the things that Shroud of the Avatar advertised during the initial Kickstarter was Richard Garriott returning to do a classic role-playing game. And classic role-playing game is a single-player experience. It's not the same thing as a sandbox MMO, which is a completely different thing. And I feel that it changed over time. I'd say very quickly, because between the end of the Kickstarter and the start of the development, it was very clear that the Steam was not a single-player experience and more on the online community game that Shroud would be. And it's very, very clear from the get-go that the energy was put in developing assets and way of monetizing the game versus developing a very coherent and very interesting story. And my hope is that now that we're getting out of the early access, we'll see more development behind the story of the game. Because right now, it's not very engaging. And yes, I can play the game with either on solo or with other players, but it's designed around player economy and player groups and going around with friends. And I feel that someone who's coming out of, let's say, World of Warcraft or EverQuest or any more classic modern MMO and want to try Shroud of the Avatar and pays expected sum of playing the game, will be very disappointed if they believe that they will find an experience similar to what they had in other mainstream MMOs. And I'm worried about the commercial success beyond the Kickstarter and the telethons they do every other week to give Richard Garriott and his team the ability to do the other chapters of the game.
That's definitely a worthy worry. I hope that they do manage to polish it enough between the next 2 months to make it an engaging, even if it at that point is unbalanced or unfinished. The important thing is to make someone play it and then the next day want to play it again. Once they've got that, so long as they don't, have somebody run out of things to do too quickly, then they have a little more time to turn it into something that's more finished, that has more balance, that has more content, that has side things that are fleshed out, that are, more crafting stuff that isn't strictly necessary to quote unquote winning the first chapter. I don't know to what extent their development budget for the next chapter is going to be dramatically lower than this, because it's going to be very un-Ultima and use the same engine. In as much as they intend to just add more to the world and then let you go back and forth between where you are and where you will be able to be then, and play things, out of order or whatever, which is its own challenge. Hopefully they'll need some additional 3D art assets so that places on another continent can have a different art style for their towns or something. but they're not going to get any of that if they don't get enough people invested in the game to not only buy the first chapter but to care that there are further chapters.
Well, the pure RPG crowd is able to have enough money to give enough money to publisher to if the game is good, to get additional chapter out. Just look at Shadowrun Returns or Pillars of Eternity or how was it called? The game came out recently. Divinity 2 came out just last year too. These are games that are built up on the reputation of the previous games. And because the games were good, people were okay to shell out extra money to get the new game. But these games are not MMOs. They are offline role-playing games. They have shared assets, but have been successful in what they do. I'm not sure that the direction Shroud of the Avatar is going very easy to expand on it. I mean, you talk about cities and feels about the city. Well, it's one of the big issues I have with Shroud of the Avatar. I mean, since 90% of a city in Shroud is player housing, there's no real sense of how to say that, traditional building types and things like that in the game. Yes, there are building types and there are center of towns or NPCs or very specific layout for towns. But because the players are able to use every type of building in any city, it's really a mix of types rather than giving you a very regional feeling for the city. If you see what I mean. And then there's the problem of endgame or character progression in Shroud of the Avatar, because it's trying to mix the two types of MMOs. That is the types of MMO of sandboxy and the type of MMO that gives you quest and expect you to progress in power level to finish the quest. You don't have this ability to loot new stuff, which will make you better in the game, which will then give you access to more complex quests or more difficult quests. Right now, the way your character levels, it's in skill level, and beyond that, you have either to craft yourself something or find somebody who will be able to craft you some new stuff. And, well, yes, it's a player economy, but it's very complicated because you have to discuss with other people, find these people, or use your precious free time to do crafting rather than questing in the game. So it's a very demanding experience, and it's not something everybody is going to be okay to do.
Well, I have my opinion in regards to quests. I have to divert here, but I think many games have so many quests and they are just very stupid quests, repetitive things without any imagination at all, and maybe harsh in my opinion, but I think those quests are precisely directed at people. They are quests without any imagination or creativity at all, and they are directed precisely at people without any imagination or creativity at all by themselves, because that's what made Ultima Online special. That you had, there was nobody telling you what to do. You could do what you wanted, and it all depended on your imagination it all depended on you looking for friends, you making friends, forming a guild or sorts, and meeting other people, getting to know each other. And that's precisely what MMOs are about. And the other side of the MMOs, the one about the quests and all those activities and going to dungeons and fighting monsters which give you uh, more powerful gear, that's a single player game. That's not an MMO. It doesn't belong to the MMO world, but it's there. And that's a sort of cancer that's doing more harm than good to the MMO genre. It's like what they are doing is they are creating single player games, player experiences, making them free to play, and then adding a lots of crap and stuff to sell in order to milk the money out of the players. And there are very few who actually bother about making the game something more massively multiplayer, something really social. And if we go back to the roots of classical RPGs, I'm talking about classical RPGs, not the console or computer RPGs. There's a sort of player economy there, even if it's a very microscopical economy because there's only one party of players. But sometimes they don't have the magical items they need, and they have to find a wizard to or a craftsman to craft what they need, or they have to create their own wizard character with the crafting skills to create those items. So, and that's a multiplayer on a very small scale, and that is still how should I say, it's a very poor it's very poorly implemented on most MMOs. And one of the MMOs on which it has, to my taste, a good, a very good crafting, a very good, complex and flexible crafting system, which which is relevant to the players and is sometimes even more desirable than whatever magical item, world boss, or powerful creature can give you, is Ultima Online.
Well, I understand, but I disagree on a point. You can have quests, and you can have a group experience. I mean, it was early on. It was EverQuest 1. It's remember, EverQuest 1 is released 1 year after Ultima Online, so it's concurrently in time the same crowd. But my first experience with Ultima Online is being player killed. I mean, I was running around. I didn't have much in the way of gold. I was trying to use my skills to get something out of the wilderness. And, well, I just got PK'd. And after that, it was very difficult to get my body because of monsters, because of people, corpse sitting my body. And in the end, I lost my body because it decayed and lost all my precious stuff. And maybe we're seeing it with rosy glasses, but early on, Ultima Online or EverQuest, dying was a real punishment because you were naked, you didn't have your stuff, you had to run back, and usually what killed you was still there. EverQuest had added a layer of story in the game that didn't exist in Ultima Online by adding quests. And if the first, well, let's say 3 level of EverQuest allowed you to play a single player game, well, very quickly they directed you to menace monsters that you had to be in group to kill. And the early EverQuest experience and any game based on the EverQuest framework that came later on, I'd say until the late 2000s, was very demanding and asked for groups and guilds to be formed to just advance in the game. You couldn't solo the content. You could try, yes, and maybe if you were lucky, you could get maybe 10% or 20% of the game through as a solo player. But you had to pick friends and to pick people, and because of the loot system in these games, which are random and which are bound to the character, you have to find people who are truly your friends and will not ninja loot you the mob you just killed. And there's a lot of things going through that required to be trusting and to have friendly people. And yes, even in games like EverQuest, you could role play your character in role playing friendly guilds. Now, about the ability to create content and go on adventure like you would do in traditional pen and paper role-playing games. It's something that's desirable, but it's very complicated to do because you have to have someone who will have more power than other players in the group to handle the framework of a quest. And that's something that doesn't exist anymore in role-playing games. It existed in Ultima Online. But right now, it's something that won't exist in Shroud again. It's people maybe on the payroll of the company who are there to create dynamic and one-of-a-kind experience by creating a challenge that won't exist on this server of the game and just exist for a couple of hours when the console, let's call it that, exists in the game. And maybe it can spawn a sword with a different looking skin. It won't give you extra power. It would transform you in a munchkin. But it's just a different color, swap palette of a sword, for example, that you can drag around with your friends when you are around. And it's something that maybe you can do with crafting, or with guilds, telling your friends, let's go in the Dungeon of Doom and beat some Balrog, if you will. But it won't have this how to say that, overreaching feeling that you did something for the game world. You'll do something for yourself and be with your friends. That's perfectly good. But if you want to have the same type of player agency that you have in role-playing games around the table with your friends and your game master, you have to someone in the game, in the video game, to be a game master too, handling monsters and giving you quest lines that are more appropriate for your players. And that's something that doesn't exist, neither in Shroud of the Avatar nor in Ultima Online right now. They don't have the money or the people to do that. So usually people expect some part of the storylines to force them to be together with other people. And it's one of the features that I want to be put in light with Shroud of the Avatar. One of the online mods is play with your friends. And how will that be handled in discussions, in quest advancements? I mean, if it's just one player who takes a quest and everybody who tags along, well, I don't need a friends-only mode. What will be the combat balance? What will be the way quests are given to players? Will it be different from a single-player game and from an MMO game? Or will it just be the MMO game, but just with a friends list? What's the point? I don't know.
Some of that does kind of encapsulate just a couple of the different groups of people that they've managed to try to market soda to, but that are going to have mutually exclusive interests in the final product, or at best, at the moment, interests that they can really only afford to go in one direction or the other. And right now, it is very much something that could be played around in a sandbox. Like I said, I haven't been on it in a while, but it will need to have direction. Like all of the things that make it a good sandbox are things that are irrelevant for the crowd that are coming in from the single player side that want a story. And I wish them the best of luck with it. It's a difficult position to be in. They need to pay their designers and developers and artists somehow. So they need to do what they're gonna do. It seems like unlike some other prominent Kickstarted projects, that it does. They are making forward progress. They are putting out a new build once a month or however often that does have something different, something better, and people are playing it and having a good time. So hopefully they can expand how many people can play it and have a good time, not in like a server load, but as in right now, the people who look for what it offers are already there. I hope that they do manage to, when they formally launch, to have the people that are already there actually show up and stick around, most importantly.
I really expect the game to succeed, but one of the features of the game, which is very complicated when you are not a dedicated player, is the crafting system. I mean, the online game version, not the single player game, but the online game version really expect you to play the crafting game. What I want to say is that you are either expected to get the resources and craft some parts yourself, or discuss player economy with other players and buy them stuff. And yes, you can buy normal stuff from merchant NPC, but it costs you so much, and I don't know if it changed recently, but you don't get much money in the game, so you won't be able to accumulate a fortune in gold pieces and buy whatever you want. There's this intention of you specializing in some sort of crafting and use it in the player market to get the money or the exchange for other stuff you want. It's obvious, like it was in Ultima Online, that players some of them will just be happy to go around getting resources in mines and smelting the ore and crafting their stuff. If you're not interested in this kind of economy, which is a market even for sandboxy people, well, it's gonna be difficult. It's gonna be difficult because your stuff will be wearing out, and you have to repair it. And again, repairing it is either with other players or with kits that you can buy for a hefty sum. And yes, it's going to be an interesting time to see what they will change. Again, you have to accept that sandbox MMO have a very different crowd, and either in person or in number, than most mainstream MMOs today. So it's a smaller community, and you can expect them to shell out the same kind of money that more broad appealing audio to games like WildStar, which is a difficult position, World of Warcraft, EverQuest 2, and more classic games. I don't expect them to be able to get that. But the question is, if they don't get a certain number of person buying the game and playing the game, will they be able to have enough money assets to keep the interest level in the game? Even if they take time to release chapter 2 and subsequent chapter of the game, you still have to get releases, not with just more polishing, but more stuff in the game. And usually, what other mainstream games do is that they have a story cycle. They want to release for a version of the game, then they release an expansion pack, which will cost you some money, and use some of that money to pay for the next releases that will go around. And Shadow of the Avatar has to go this way. They want to keep the interest of the people, because even if you have the sandboxy type, well, not everybody will have time to play this sandbox type game for all the life. I mean, you grow up, you get a family, you change of job, and sometimes you just have time to devote to be in a sandboxy game. Sometimes I have hardly time to play a single player game. Sometimes I have 6 months between the last save game and restarting the game. So it's a fleeting experience, and you have to take that in account to how to really handle the money you get from players, how you will invest it. Because players interested in Shroud of the Avatar when it was announced may already not have enough time to play it right now because of the time of development.
But I can give you the other side of the coin. Be blunt. MMOs and sandbox games are not for casual players. They are for dedicated players. And a dedicated player will consume a game content in matters of a single month or maybe 2. They will be at the top of the game by that time, and they will have nothing else to do by then.
Yeah, and that's an issue with most MMOs. And I'd say it's the same thing with single-player games. If you're a really dedicated player in single-player games, not MMOs, you will consume the game in a matter of weeks. Then you have to decide if you want to restart the game and check new quest direction that you didn't choose before or not. And that's why some games are very, very interesting in the broad direction they give in the player and the ability to change the way they play the game. And MMOs, more classic MMOs, do that with handling endgame content with dungeon raiding or PvP. And sandbox games are there to give you the way to do that with more do-it-yourself. But then for people who, and I'm not a casual gamer, but I don't have the same kind of time I have right now. I want to play these games. I like to be dedicated, but I have a family and a life. And then again, dedicated player for more classic MMOs won't be interested. I mean, I have good friends who are much younger than me and have much more time who play Dungeon and Raids and are part of a guild in World of Warcraft. And they're pretty dedicated. They are here every other night, but they don't care about crafting. You see, it's very different. It's dedicated players, sure, but it's dedicated players with different mindsets. And when I was playing Ultima Online,
with no interest at all. I know of players with no interest at all on combat, which are their main interest is crafting.
And that's very great. And that's what I said before. You have to have a guild which can which can support your type of play. And that was something very, very, very strong in early Ultima Online. Right now, it's difficult because most of the crowd disappeared from Ultima Online, or it depends on the servers, depends on the people you know, but it's not the same appeal for the wide. I don't see, not dedicated, but wider audience. And one of the things that I think is missing, it exists in a different form, but in Ultima, in Shroud of the Avatar, that existed in Ultima Online, is that you could have your guild to really craft your guild hall, and that's something I think that doesn't exist in any other game except Ultima Online. The ability to have a house the way you want it to be. In Shroud, you buy a template of a house and you can furnish it inside if you have the money to buy it. But in Ultima Online, you could really craft your castle like you want, provided you have the money and the resources. And I don't know if player-owned towns have the same kind of feeling that you hold guild hall in Ultima Online. But again, I'm working all the day. I'm not interested in working when I'm going to play a game, if you will. And it's okay. My type of play is based on exploration. I like to explore. I don't like to do quests for doing quests or PvP combat. And everybody's happy with what we expect. So in Shroud of the Avatar, for example, I like to enter in new scenes and see how they are different from other scenes I was in. Sometimes it's me running around because the monsters are too powerful for me, but I just like to explore a new place, and it's perfectly okay.
Now, the next big and possibly related question, if we actually have anything to say about it, has anyone poked around in Underworld Ascendant?
Well, right now, Underworld Ascendant is just videos, right? So we don't have much to talk about. I think I'm really expecting the game to be what we said before, good at offering you diverse ways of winning you out of a situation, like they showed in multiple occasions in the game. To compare it with MMO, where it's more of a linear experience. Underworld Ascendant is preparing you to use your brain to get out of any situation that you will be thrown in.
There is a pre-alpha build that's available to certain levels of backers, but I have not tried to poke at it. I wasn't sure if anybody else here, of which there are not that many anyway, had managed to poke at it or not.
I didn't invest enough money in Underworld to get that access right now. But
And the videos do look pretty good. I was dubious at first about the art style shift that happened, a year or so ago now at this point. But it does actually, when that's how the whole world looks, it does look pretty good. I like it. But I haven't had a chance to poke at the build or do more than just read their occasional press releases and, the PAX video or whatever that one was.
Yeah. It's a really beautiful game from what we see. No, I really expect it to be a good game and challenging for expectations. But what I'm interested, yes and no, is to see how we will handle the Britannia and New Britannia connection. We know that the Dark Elves from Underworld are connected to the Dark Elves of New Britannia, and because of people like how is it called, the evil sorcerer in Ultima Underworld?
Tybalt?
Tybalt, yes. That Tybalt will be returning in the game. So it's expected to be the same Breathtaking Abyss that was destroyed at the end of the first game. So I don't know. I'm curious.
It's been destroyed a lot.
Yeah, but it was set to exist for thousands of years before Britannia. So we'll see. I'm very, very interested in this game. I don't know what we'll get out of it, but
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And once again, it's just going to end up on the pile of games that I backed on Kickstarter and won't have time to play for another year. But yeah, I am very curious. You know, I expect, given some of the people that are working on it, that while we don't know very much about it, they've only teased things like Tybalt will be returning and Carabas is around, Carabas's ghost is there and stuff like that. But I anticipate there being a strong story, and a rich and fortunately limited world to explore and learn things about. I would expect that the connection to each of Britannia and New Britannia is something that we'll see things about in corners and at edges, and for explorers and lore seekers to find and go, I see what you did there, I see how that connects, rather than like a mass exodus tour from New Britannia being a key plot point, or them talking about much of anything that happened in the Ultima series beyond that Ultima Underworld 1 happened. I would not be surprised if the name Lord British never comes up, although I also wouldn't be too surprised if it did, since it's divorced from the rest of the Ultima IP.
Yeah, and yes, two things about that. Underworld has the support of Richard Garriott, and they did some cross promotional items.
Right.
So I expect the tie to New Britannia to be easier to spot in the game than the tie to the original Britannia, still under license from Electronic Arts.
I agree. Sorry, go ahead.
Yet, Ultima Online was really Ultima Online. I'm sorry. Ultima Underworld was really divorced, especially the first game, from the main Britannian storyline. I mean, it never pops in before, never pops in after. There's no indication in Ultima 7 that the Stygian Abyss has been destroyed, or that the town that was next to the abyss was destroyed, and neither in game assets nor in dialogues.
Right.
So it's an odd thing in the game. I won't say it's like Mondrash, but it's very separated. While Ultima Underworld 2 is very, very deeply connected to the rest of the Guardian saga, this game is so different. It's a good game, the original one. I really loved it, but I never popped any time after that. Same goes for Savage Empire and Machine Dreams, which are adventure you have when you are not in Britannia, but they are never referenced after that either.
Yeah, and I, for one, when I was growing up and playing all of the Ultima games, I skipped the Worlds of and the Underworlds entirely at the time. The Worlds of were just so bizarre that was easy to just decide, okay, this obviously isn't a main part of the experience. And, I'm 14 or however old I was when they came out. So it was kind of easy to decide not to spend my allowance on them.
I understand that.
Underworld, man, that one came. I saw the ads for that in Dragon Magazine or whatever, and it bugged me at the time because it's like the Abyss was already destroyed once.
Yeah.
So, and that's even before the Abyss is destroyed because when they took the Codex out, and then it's back, and then it blows up again, and then it's back in 9 again. And it's just like, for God's sake, people, make up your mind.
Yeah. But back in the 90s, I bought my first Ultima game. It was Ultima 5 at a local Tandy shop, which was the same thing as a Radio Shack in the US.
That's right. Yeah.
And I didn't have a PC to play the game, so I was looking at the discs and reading the manuals for a long time. And a couple of years later, my father had a PC, and I totally missed out the release of Ultima 6. By the time I had the money to buy Ultima 6, Ultima 6 was not in the game stores anymore, because it was the way it worked back then. And the next installment of the Ultima series was not Ultima 6, it was Ultima Savage Empire. So after Ultima 5, my next Ultima game was Savage Empire. And I love this game because of the way the change they did in the game, allowing you to... And the world of games, despite of their weirdness, still had this core component of world interaction that existed in many Ultima games. And to piggyback on the discussion we had on MMOs and Stupid Quest, I agree. But it's very complicated to do meaningful quests in MMOs because it's a static world, and you don't have the same way of handling quests as you have in single player. Let's say if you have to find parts to power a drill and to destroy rock to go in a mine in a single player games, it's very easy with air quotes to do. In an MMO game, it's possible too, but you have to respawn the rocks and have to take in account that everybody can be behind you and complete the quest at the same time, and so only one player can have the fix. It's possible, but it will never have the same impact in the game world that you have in a single player, because you can change the environment. Events like the release of the Banes in Ultima 7 will be difficult to happen in an MMO world, because you can just kill a whole town and get away with it. Other players will come around and will need to access to these NPCs. And yes, you can have phasing, but you won't give they won't give a shit, because the thing is, people will exist in different phases, and sometimes you have to go on with a friend who are not as advanced as you are in the quest, and it won't be the same thing in the same place. It's complicated. And so to get back to Ultima Underworld, when Ultima Underworld was released, I didn't have a powerful PC configuration to play it, but I was a couple of years later when it was re-released on CD-ROM, and God, this game worked. Finding the runes, trying to create new spells out of the blue, because you were not limited by the you weren't limited by the spell list, but you were not limited by actually knowing the spell. You could try to create new spells, and there was a number of secret spells in the game, and that was something new at the time. And I don't think any of the game let you create spells out of the fly like Ultima Underworld was.
Well, 5 had 1 or 2, but
Yeah, but what was it? That was an MMO. Ashran's Call, the first game.
yeah, I was going to point that one out too.
Yeah, Ashran's Call, the first game. When you were a mage, it was a mini game in itself because you had to have implements and reagents and things like that. And depending on the power of the spell you wanted to discover, the type of spell you wanted to cast, you had to have everything around and create your spell. And it was something very interesting. I think that the Elder Scrolls single player game did let you create spells too, at least in the first 2 games, if I remember well. So my point is, well, we'll see if Ultima Underworld, if Underworld Ascendant will have this same kind of agency in letting you handling spells and maybe runes in a free-form way.
It certainly does sound like something that they would like to do. They've been talking it up like that might be, with how.
And it's something that I was disappointed in Tabula Rasa because did you play the game?
I did not.
Okay, Tabula Rasa had these powerful supernatural psychic powers that you could develop as a player class. And some of the requirements was finding rune type sword called Logos, and I expected something of a way of handling these Logos because combining them together was a requirement to unlocking the ability of your character. So you had to hunt for places. Mini dungeon or secret low places or things like that where logos were located and find them before you were able to use some of your powers. Not all of them, but some of them were requirements. And I totally expected to be able to handle these logos abilities in a more freeform type like runes. And it was not, but that's an anecdote. Anyhow, it's 6:30 in the morning for me, so I will have to leave you. Maybe I have maybe 5 or 10 more minutes to go. If you are a subject you want to discuss,
I, for one, am good. I think we've hit some high points and hopefully said a couple of things that are possibly someone might consider interesting.
Yeah.
We can let Kenneth take this and put an intro and an outro on it.
Yeah, just because I may have been the devil's advocate earlier in this discussion, I really do like sandboxy game, but I feel that it's a demanding type of game that not everybody will like, and that's my concern here. I really want Shroud of the Avatar to be successful because I'm curious, because I'm an explorer at heart, to see what Richard has in waiting for the later chapter in the games. But I fear that if it's not successful enough, we'll never see this materializing.
And that's a reasonable fear, but that I hope winds up being unfounded.
Yeah, they now have the technology and the assets, the basic assets for the game. And I understand that it's not everybody's taste, but obviously Richard Garriott wants to tell a story, so there are some parts of questing that will exist beyond the sandboxy type of Shroud of the Avatar, and I want him to be able to distance himself from what existed with Ultima without completely making a 180. Because when you play Shroud, there are reminiscing things about Ultima, virtues, virtue quest, and discussion about about how the virtues were lost, and avatars and things like that. And even the world itself is hinted as being a possibility of what is left of Britannia after the events of Ultima 9. It was the subject of another SSH podcast. But and I really want him to go in that direction and maybe do an unofficial sequel to his main Ultima series with Shroud and the different chapters. But we'll have to wait and see.
If you want to join the Ultima Dragons, you can do so at udic.org, where you can choose your very own dragon name. You can also find the Ultima Dragons on Facebook. We have a Facebook group there. And you can follow at Ultima Dragons on Twitter, or join them on Discord. And if you're feeling really old school, you can even fire up a Telnet client and check out the Weremount. Hit up the show notes for links to all of these. If you want to participate more directly in the podcast, you can send us an email, or if you're feeling a little bit braver, leave us a voice message in one of 3 places: the podcast website, our Facebook page, or on Anchor.fm. And you're also welcome to join us on our Discord server to chat with us, to lurk, or even contribute to podcast recordings when they happen. And again, links in the show notes. If you'd like to support Spam Humbug, you can do so at patreon.com/ultimacodex, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to episodes the day before they go live to the general public. You'll also get access to behind-the-scenes audio when we have some to share, and possibly other interesting content. But we also welcome your moral support. You can like the Ultima series on Facebook, follow at Ultima Codex on Twitter, or leave the podcast a review on iTunes. And you're also welcome to share our episodes with your friends and social media circles. Spam Humbug is a production of the Ultima Codex. You can find show notes online at spamhumbug.com. Thank you for listening, and until next time, be virtuous.